The committee of the whole is called to order. Colleagues, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have a quorum. Please be advised, colleagues, Chapter 11 is now open. No further amendments. We'll begin with Hold on, folks.
Just a point of inquiry, Mr. Chair.
A point of inquiry for what? We just started, so a point of inquiries for what?
Before we begin on Chapter 11, Mr. Chair, first, good morning to my colleagues and to yourself. It's going to be a tough week, but I'm sure we can all try and get through what's important to the island. Mr. Chair, I just wanted to, as we move forward, to make it clear on the rules of engagement on Chapter 11. I was told that amendments that were coming in are first come, first serve. That might have changed, so I'd like to hear your perspective on your rules on moving forward, number one. Number two, I know that the amendments have been placed on the drive. However, there are circumstances where an amendment to the amendment may be proffered to either strengthen it or to correct any issues with it. So I just wanted to hear your perspective before we get started, Mr. Chair, on Chapter 11 as we move through all the remaining chapters of miscellaneous. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, you wanted to know, you want to know how the amendments are going to go by? We're going to go with first come, first serve, okay? Second, if you have an amendment to the amendment, that will be entertained, okay? And that won't be treated on first come, first serve because it's specifically to that amendment, okay? All right?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Madam Vice Speaker, you raised your hand? Ma'am? You wanted to speak?
Yes, sir. I do have several amendments, sir, but the first one is on the Professional Student Exchange Program. Manana Situas, thank you for giving me the opportunity. This floor amendment represents the joining of two...
Ma'am?
Point of order. Yeah.
Ma'am?
What?
The first amendment on the list, I can read it out. Does everybody have a copy of all the amendments?
Which is the first one?
In the order that it was received, okay? The first amendment is by Senator Amanda Shelton. Let's take a quick recess. Colleagues, reminder, First amendment submitted will be entertained first. So look at your drive and look at the dates and look at the time. Okay, that's why we're going to stay on recess until everybody pretty much has gotten into the groove of exactly the order. Okay, first turned in is first entertained. Look in your drive. It has the date and time. committee of the whole is called to order.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Duenas.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me, but much like my colleague, the good Senator Talatidegui earlier had asked for some discussion on rules of the game here. But I have to say that after visualizing these amendments and basically the pages and the amounts, which at this point in time, Mr. Chairman, looks to be at least 1/3 or possibly even half the value of the budget that we adopted, I'm going to make a motion at this time that we do not entertain any appropriations in this chapter subject to a supplemental appropriation that the chair will call for at the start of the fiscal year based on financials tracking properly. Mr. Chairman, as far as I'm concerned right now, this is going to be funny money that we're attempting to appropriate. Mr. Chairman, also in my discussions with the OFB director, every agency in this fiscal year is tracking above, is going to receive more revenue than they've received in this current fiscal year. No agency is going to not be able to operate with the beginning of the fiscal year with the levels that we've adopted in this budget, Mr. Chairman. And I think in order to really vet what are the true priorities of our government, we need to do this in a fashion of fiscal responsibility based on stronger data to support the revenues and to do a supplemental appropriation called by the chair so that we can do this in a fashion and in a way that we show the people of Guam we're truly funding the priorities. Many of us have got plenty of calls over the weekend and emails and texts talking about their priorities that are not funded. Instead of going through a litany of what they are, we know what they are because we discussed them during the fiscal year. But this, Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, will not identify any priority. This will be Hunger Games in Chapter 11. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm asking for you to accept my motion and that we do the language changes and everything else that we need to operate our government in this miscellaneous section, but we do not entertain any of these appropriations that are proposed. One caveat to that I will say is there are some that we adopted in the revenues that were adopted earlier as part of the budget. Those should be in play because we adopted them as part of the budget. But everything else should be a supplemental appropriation, and I make that motion this time, Mr. Chairman.
So your motion is to be more specific, to not entertain any amendments in Chapter 11 that deals with what, 24?
That deals with 24 or 25, any revenues that were not adopted in the adopted revenues in Chapter 1. Any revenues that are not as part of adopted revenues as revenues that are identified in this budget are ruled out of order, and we will entertain this as a supplemental appropriation at a later time called by the budget chair.
All right. My colleagues, you've heard the motion. Do I hear any objection to that motion?
Sorry, point of inquiry.
Yes, ma'am.
So we're talking about projected for 2025, not what's in excess of 24?
Even 24, all revenues that were not adopted on page 1 in Chapter 1 as part of the revenues that we're adopting in this budget.
Did that answer the question, Senator Burris?
Yeah, just a kind of question because, you know, the lapses, that was a question that I asked of the panel, and I wasn't able to get a clear answer on that. So, you know, I think, yeah, I have reservations about including the excess of 24, and plus considering we don't know the lapses too as well.
Mr. Chair, a point of information.
Yes.
I believe every chapter in this budget, a member on this floor had made a motion for carryover of lapses. This will not affect lapses because it's already in the budget before we got to Chapter 11.
That's correct. So, Senator Burris, back
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I see there's a lot of amendments that are asking for continuing a use of lapses. So that, you know, that's my concern too as well. Plus, you know, if we do have alternate sources of funding. You know, even though it states projected revenues, there is an alternate, for some of us, we found alternate source, an identifiable source. So that's my other reservation, because if we do have a supplemental source, that is not included, but it exists.
Senator Parrish, are you referring to if somewhere in the chapter we identified we're going to delete something and move it to entertain it in chapter 11? Are you referring to that?
No, I'm not. I'm referring to a fund that's not tracked by the first chapter, but there's money there.
Not tracked in the first chapter? Can you
Yes.
give a more clear example? So,
Yeah, so I would-
because I do have amendments too in this pile, so
Yeah.
I need to know where you're coming from on that one.
Because, you know, my amendment identifies future potential funding, but I have an alternate source that's a real source. So I want to entertain it, if that's okay.
As you hear the motion, it's about 24 and 25, okay? Has it anything to do with the budget today that we addressed in chapter 1?
Yeah, so I'm saying,
That's what the motion is.
yeah, I'm saying there's a gray area.
Okay, there's a gray area.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
All right.
point of information, that should, even lapses that are identified to be carried over in this chapter should not be affected, because
That's
they are
correct.
lapsed funds that are currently tracking within the budget that the agency has.
Correct.
What I'm moving to delete is any amendment identifying 2024 excess or 2025 projected excess revenue.
Thank you. Okay,
And,
did you understand what
I am
what
saying,
motion-
but
okay.
my reservation is there's a gray area that I don't
Okay.
want to necessarily make these out of order, because there's alternate funding. That's a real source.
We can debate that, Mr.
Understood.
Chair, when we get to it.
Yeah, we can debate that when we get there. Senator
But
Barnett,
the
I know you
motion
had
is
your hand
clear,
up.
2024 and 2025.
Comment to his motion so that we can move to the vote?
Just a point of inquiry, Mr. Chair. So, what then is going to happen to the 10 million that we're trying to give DOE for maintenance, or the 3 million for school security, or any number of these amendments? Can you just explain for the public, and then obviously some of us new members, what then becomes of these amendments, and what is the procedure to have them entertained in a supplemental budget? Because the process now, it's like we kind of get a fair shot, and I just don't know what happens if we're not going to entertain these amendments. Does it then become, subject to your committee's jurisdiction, and then you have to hold the hearings? If you could just explain the process, if this motion passes and we don't entertain any of these amendments to the budget.
Well, number one, the first thing I will do as the Committee on Appropriations, I will sit down with all the amendments that were entertained, all the amendments, and I'd have to put it in a bill of some form as a supplemental budget. Okay? And then I will introduce it so we can immediately have a hearing. And I'm looking at, as he mentioned, we're looking at maybe in October to have that hearing so we can address, like you mentioned, your 10 million. I've got quite a few millions here in amendments too that I was hoping to address. But that being stated, there's a motion. That's how we would address it. And yes, your 10 million will be considered on that list. Definitely will be.
I guess just on a further point of inquiry, is it your discretion to decide what amendments will go on the bill, or are we making a motion to include all of the amendments?
I'm going to include it all. I'll make that very clear right now. I will include every amendment here and just have to tweak on how we're going to address it and list it. I will include your amendment, definitely.
Mr. Chair, on a point of information, can you
Yes.
please have the
I'm gonna go
proffer
with
of
the
the
motion.
amendment, please?
Yes.
And unless you want to step down.
No, I'm going to.
Thank you.
Okay. There is a motion on the floor. Any objection to the?
Wait.
Yes.
I have a point of inquiry.
Okay.
And just for those who are listening, the public who are watching this session, it's been becoming very popular out there in the public. There are two concerns, of course, that people have come up to me and talked to me and says, wow, how much are these amendments so far? And I said, well, close to about, almost $100 million. Well, how much is in there? Right now, it's at 27 right now is what we're tracking, 27 million. We only have 2 more months to go. And every time there's a budget session, I've always asked BBMR and even DOA, especially DOA since he's a professional accountant, To be fiscally responsible, how much money should we have in our excess unaudited account as we end the fiscal year? How much should we have? Well, to be safe is to have about $30 million in our any excess revenue that's there, to be safe. I remember talking to OFB. I think it was 2021 or 2022. We had an excess of $60 million. By the time the audit was completed, it only had 30 million. So that explains why DOA, that explains why OFB, and even the conservativeness of my side, the party, to have that excess revenue, at least to have some funding there at the end of a fiscal year, to be financially, well, not just conservative, but responsible. We need to be more responsible on the people's money. We don't know the new norm. We don't know the sky stopped raining federal funds, and the deadline is the end of this year. So there are a lot of variables put into place that we have to be very cautious about. My only concern, Mr. Chair, as the chairman on appropriations, which holds quite a bit of power, and even myself, Mr. Chair, as the vice chair, I too have amendments in here, important ones, especially for the cancer care, that I've been fighting every single time I've come into this session, budget time, to ensure that they get what by law and what's needed. And if you've seen this registry of the cancer care scenario right now, you'll see that cancer has grown even more. There are more people having cancer, and specialized cancer, when we do not have the facility or the treatment on Guam. But I want to be fair, Mr. Chair, and I wanted to hear from you. A lot of these amendments came in because they were told first come, first serve. And that sounds not responsible, it sounded fair, very fair. First come, first serve. So people who are really on this, they were there submitting these amendments since August 14th. They started submitting and make sure they're in time. I know Senator Barnett, he was first in line making sure that his schools are taken care of. And he needs quite a bit of funding for these schools, as we're all watching and seeing how this is transpiring and seeing it in the paper, if anyone had a chance to read the paper the other day. It's going to need a whole lot more. So I just want to make sure that if we go into a supplemental budget, Mr. Chair, that you said that you're going to stick all these amendments in there, but I think it's important that we also keep to a fairness on what goes in these amendments first, to be addressed first. Is it Section 1, DOE, Section 2, Public Health, and Section 3, Public Safety? I mean, we have to really watch what this supplemental budget is going to transpire into, who is first. We want to be fair. And I'm hoping that my colleagues, we can actually have a sit down and try and discuss the importance of what's needed out there. But I just wanted to make it clear that I want fairness on this supplemental budget. If you ask me, I'd rather have any kind of excess revenue that we're going to use is audited. FY2024 audited excess revenue to be appropriated. But sometimes I'm asking way too much for this body because we're all anxious to spend the money. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. There is a motion on the floor. Madam Speaker?
Yeah, on the motion, I understand what the proffer of the motion intends. That it is pretty overwhelming. We've got 27 million in excess, but the floor amendments that have been submitted are about $100 million total. And if we're coming on a first come, first served basis, that doesn't necessarily prioritize these based on need or principle even for the people of Guam. We also have amendments to appropriate the excess 25 revenues. Those are potential. Those are not proven yet. Those are just potential. And if they come in, those right now introduced for this chapter are about $31 million, unless any were submitted this morning. We also have amendments, and most of these are mine, that are reprogramming funds that had been defunded from earlier in the budget. So these are general fund, and I'm assuming these will go through or can be discussed because they're general fund amendments. But I believe my colleague was also pointing out that there may be other amendments with other funds, some other source. So, and I guess you had said we would debate those at the time. My issue is that, first of all, some of these are, for example, like detox programs. I don't think they should wait until October. They want to expand these beds. I think they should know whether they're going to be able to do it or not, like now. Maybe some of these issues can wait until October. The other thing is just the logistics of that. One bill with $100 million in excess 24 revenue, when we know we only have $27 million in excess revenue, is really not a legitimate bill. It should be ruled that it's out of order because it exceeds any kind of certification that OFB can give, right? That we have enough funds to meet this FY24. And, you know, and unless OFB just reallocates that. But yeah, I think if we need to prioritize the FY24 revenue, I would like to do that, at least have some discussion on it today, because otherwise we put it all off until October. We don't know what the bill's going to look like in October. We don't know which of these is really going to be in need prior to October, which just means at the beginning of the fiscal year. And while I think some of these are more important based on what they're funding versus first come, first serve, I do worry that not everything will be included in any potential bill, and we will, because of the rules, you know, that say we can only meet the funds that we have. So I'm worried that, yeah, some of us have worked hard to try to sway our colleagues to fund some of these critical needs, or what we see as critical needs, and that I don't want to end that discussion today. I don't want to walk away and say we're not going to fund the detox when we have a potential to do that today. Things like that. So I'm thinking perhaps we can, I don't know, talk a little bit more, maybe offline, or maybe just review these lists, the list of what we've really got before us, and just try to contemplate for ourselves what really can be the priority, which ones are urgent, which ones are not, and then make a more clarified decision on, let's consider a couple of these things, and everything else maybe we can put off until October, until OFB, you know, can confirm whether we've got additional FY24 revenues, whether we won't know anything about FY25 at that time. But yeah, that's why I'm not sure the information is going to change that much between now and October versus what we have right now, except our ability to look at these lists. That's really what we're rushing on. It's the ability to look at this list that is overwhelming and pick the ones that can match 27 million today, and after today, if there are excess funds next month, we can deal with that at that time, perhaps. I don't know. That's
you.
why I understand the motion. It's creative, and it would help us in one way, but I think it would hurt us in another way, Mr. Chair, or hurt the agencies.
All right. You wanted to comment on the motion? No, you're the only one left, and I'm ready to move on the motion. So we need to move on the motion. Senator Brown?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. You know, I've been thinking about this section as we've been here over the last couple of weeks, because recognizing the amount of amendments that have been put forth, and I understand there are a number of critical projects that many of us have and would like to see appropriated. But my concern, and again, being fiscally conservative, if we are only tracking right now about $27 million, unaudited $27 million, and we do have the, you know, the remaining month of September that is going to be with us shortly, before we actually are really going to know what's going to be left by the time whatever needs to be expended this upcoming month is going to be addressed. But the amount of amendments, and they are substantial, and some of the price tags on them are even more substantial. And I don't think I'm in a position here, I don't know how we're going to squeeze all, you know, close to $100 million worth of investment into 27 million, assuming 27 million exist. So I think it's important that we do define and know what it is we're doing. I don't like these unappropriated funds that we don't even know if they're real. I don't want us to go back to the days, and there was a time, Mr. Chair, when we were appropriating in the legislature and we didn't care whether there was any money available. Your dad remembers those days. That was very common. Without verifying it, the money. That's why fiscal notes, we were there requiring fiscal notes. That's why today we require fiscal notes to be attached to these appropriations so that we know, and when we make public statements that we're making these appropriations, that the money actually exists and we're not making false promises. Because, you know, sure, the governor's office has their challenges, but I think it's unfair if we do appropriations and say, oh, go see the governor. We already appropriated. Ask the governor. The governor's the one hiding the money. But in this particular case, we're already financially starting to see the challenges that we're not able up front in this existing budget to ensure a lot of critical services really are getting the appropriations that they need for the services that our people will expect. So while I recognize both sides of the concern here, I do have concern with the, you know, substantial. I mean, this would take us how many days to get through? And I don't want to be in a position of saying, okay, what's the first 27 million, assuming it's there, let's do those first, and everybody else after that, well, tough luck. But I just, you know, we got to take some seriousness with regards to the budget process and what we're doing, and make sure that the money's there to do it. And I'm not sure right now with what we're proposing, and I've been bothered by this over the last couple of weeks, really getting ready for this chapter. Probably going, am I going to speak on every amendment, or do I just sit here and be quiet? And, you know, then the people find out that there's no real money behind the appropriations we're making, and I don't think that would be responsible for us to proceed in that manner. So thank you for the opportunity to comment on this proposed
Senator Burnett,
motion.
you have anything for the motion? Because we're going to move on the motion immediately after you speak.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning again to my colleagues. Happy Monday. Yeah, I just feel like we all knew the process, and it was a matter of getting your amendments in first come, first serve. And so being the chair of education and looking at the situation with the schools, I took that seriously. And I got in amendments to appropriate $10 million for GDOE's maintenance repair of schools, also $3 million for school security, Guam Police Department as an appropriation for the school resource officers. And we all knew it was first come, first serve. And there was even an added opportunity to proffer new amendments when we recessed Friday, and the chapter remained open. And then we come in here Monday morning, and there's apparently there was a caucus outside. Just call you guys, go back, watch the tape. There was a caucus outside, and there's some deals was made, and then we came in, and all of a sudden it was like, no, we're not going to entertain. I mean, you know, it is what it is, guys. And I'm just worried, you know, my staff worked hard to get these amendments in because that was the process, and now it's like all of a sudden, come Monday morning, we're changing the rules in the middle of the game, and I get that, you know, there's $90 million of amendments and $27 million of funding, but I mean, I don't know what's stopping us from giving the 10 million to GDOE and handling the first 27 million of them, putting the rest in a supplemental budget, because I just, it is what it is, and I don't, and I know, Mr. Chair, that you had said you want to put all these amendments in, but you know, the priorities, I think, got to be education. I mean, they asked for 303 million, they're getting cut down to the bone, and by passing this motion, I think what it does is it puts everything in the power of the appropriations chair. And you know, with all due respect, I just worry that, you know, the buddy, whoever's buddy is going to get the priority, and then we're going to get stuck, you know, with the short end of the stick come time for the supplemental budget. So, and I don't know if it's, you know, they didn't get the special interest amendments in soon enough, and now it's like we're not going to have money to entertain that when we go down the line. I don't know, but I just, it is what it is, I guess. But I would just oppose it because we had a whole process that was laid out, ever since we were all told, get your amendments in first. And it's first come, first served. And a lot of us worked hard to do that. And so to come in here Monday morning and have the rug pulled out of from under us, I just don't know if I trust that this motion passing will not only preserve the priority, because I do question some of our priorities in here, but whether or not it'll keep education at the front of the line. I'm just not confident in that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Burnett. I thought we were friends, but that's okay. But anyway, education. But on the motion, do you want to close, Senator Reyes?
I want to close on the motion, Mr. Chair, and you know, I'm going to say I'm very sympathetic, and I understand what some of the arguments have been put forward. But let's be honest and let's be real. It's not going to matter first come, first serve. When we pass $120 million worth of amendments, it's going to matter on what the priority is identified, because we don't control that part from the executive level. We got to know our role. Our role here is to appropriate, and then if we don't like the way it's being executed, then we call a hearing and we have it done the way we think it's supposed to be done and put it in law if we have to subsequently. But first in, first out was not going to be how first paid and not first paid was going to be done in here. And that's why I make the motion. Okay? If it was a total of 27 million, I would understand. But it's not. And then there's further appropriations for 2025, which is really a dream. I mean, I want that dream to come true. But the fact is, I trust you, Mr. Chair. You made a statement on the record, and every one of us can take this home like it's our own personal Bible, that this is what was adopted on this floor when the chapter closed as the proposed amendments. I trust you, Mr. Chairman, to introduce your supplemental appropriation identifying all of these amendments and say what are the priorities during that time of debating that. I'm sure our good senator on education will more than likely prevail on the majority of the money that's identified here. But it will be debated in a process that is clear and clean in the front of our people, and that many of us don't run around saying, and like my good friend Senator Brown said, saying, oh, heck, what? I don't know, go see the governor, I passed the amendment. That's not fair to anybody, Mr. Chairman. That's not fair to the entity. That's not fair to the gymnastics that will be done in order to be able to say, sorry, lying. I mean, Mr. Chairman, you identified a lot of money for education in the last fiscal year. When I appropriated the 20 million through a bill that was heard, and it was actually 30 and it was lowered to 20, we realized, okay, it's there. It shouldn't have been taken from the position of being part of repairs of our schools. And we did, as a body, say this is the priority. Every single one of us did. So I don't see any difference with your supplemental appropriation, Mr. Chair, but I just think that many of my colleagues have spoke up, and I think very eloquently on this issue, that trying to adopt this and then run around town saying, good luck. And once again, in closing, there's nothing that says the first in, first out of these appropriations is the first to be funded. You're passing an omnibus bill that is loaded with dreams, but short on reality. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Do we have any objection to the motion? Please raise your hand. There is one objection. All in favor, please raise your hand. 3, 4, 5, 6. Motion passes. At this time, I'm going to have the clerk clean up the drive of all the amendments, and then, we're just going to give him a few minutes. He's working on it right now. And I will rest assure you to include Senator Barnett, because we're friends. DOE will be on that list, on that supplemental. I'm in favor of DOE.
Si Dios Masi, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Duly noted.
Okay, so we're at recess at this time.
Oh, don't
Yes?
let him delete the drive, though, just in case. So maybe we just go through and we just pass instead of, I don't want him to create a new doc after he's already done all the work to put them all in order.
So we'll just go through the listing. We can go through the listing, and I'll just rule it out of order, if that's the case. Let's quick recess. Let's recess this time. Committee of the Whole is called back to order. Colleagues, we'll begin with an amendment by TMT, that's the speaker, right? By Speaker Therese Terlai on notwithstanding any provision of law, final to appropriate the general fund to the Department of Public Health. If I'm correct, I think this fund came from, when we discussed this earlier in the chapter, from OHAP. Am I correct? Okay, Madam Speaker, you would have to reveal that, but I'm assuming that's where it came from. All right, is everybody on track? We're on, the amendment is on page 117 from Madam Speaker, from Speaker Terlai. No, your amendment. We're on the amendment. Are you ready? Okay. Just so you can identify the source of that funding. Because I may be wrong in what I stated earlier.
Point of inquiry, Mr. Chair, just to verify.
Yes?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We just received something on our desks here.
Yeah, the new
And
stack?
right, the new one, and it begins on page 117.
That's
and-
correct.
Okay, so this is the one we're following now.
That's correct.
Throughout. Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Madam Speaker, your amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This first amendment is to appropriate $500,000 from the general fund to the Department of Public Health and Social Services for grants to the Homeless Coalition or to provide shelter, food, and medical care for homeless individuals. This was money being redirected from salaries at OHAP to these direct services for the homeless, Mr. Chair. So I ask for support for this amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Does anyone like to speak to this? The funding was identified, came from OHAP earlier in the bill, in the budget bill. Madam Speaker, Vice Speaker?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. As I look at this amendment, taking the $500,000 that was appropriated, which originally came from the Office of Homelessness, I want to inquire from the author, what program does public health have in reference to taking care of the homeless? I know that when the provision of the resources that were first allocated through this budget, through the executive branch, and then further working in your office, the 1.06 funding source that was allocated for the Office of the Homeless Program was set, and I know that there was funds in there for the programs that exist, working with what was already given to them from the federal funds. So I'm going to ask the author of this if she can delineate
Yes.
what part.
All right. Madam Speaker, do you yield to the question?
Sure. As you know, there is no statutory Office of the Homeless on Guam yet. It's only a creation of the governor's office. Everything is controlled within the governor's office, including what their mission will be, how they will use the federal funds, and apparently they want to use local funds as well, which it's just that there is no creation for that. It's the Department of Public Health and Social Services that is really the only agency on Guam that has been authorized to run shelters, that has run shelters for the protection of the people of Guam, that has run shelters for the foster children, women, men. They run they and behavioral health run detox programs. So another portion of this amendment also goes towards the detox programs at behavioral health for services for all of those in our community, including homeless who need these services as well. And that's really what's happening. If there is money that is dedicated through the governor's office, then There is nothing to prevent the governor's office from continuing to do that. We did not affect her ability to do that. We did not touch anything that she is currently doing. So if she has the authority and ability to do that right now, today, she should continue with that, if that's how they want to do it. But if they want to run it through the government of Guam, we need to make formal arrangements for that. And that's why I propose that it be done through the Department of Public Health, who is the only agency that can actually provide, or has in the past provided, food and shelter. And that's how we get these resources out. They've partnered very well with the Guam Homeless Coalition over the years and able to move the resources through the partners of the Guam Homeless Coalition. That's who's really giving the food out to these people and giving them shelters when they needed it and giving them, you know, directing them to which agencies of the government could provide housing, such as GURA. So it really is for the direct services that the government already provides. This is just to add on so that public health can also provide additional direct services.
Does that suffice, Madam Vice?
No, what I was really concerned about too, Mr. Chair, is what is the total amount defunded from OHAP? Because I want to make sure that I have the right amount, because it appears that the amendments that are here with us today adds more than what was defunded from them. And I think we should be taking a running tab of these amounts so that when we have reached that funding ceiling, we can stop entertaining the amendments. Because if I look at my notes and I look at what was provided when we first had the chapters, the previous chapter on the executive branch, I think it was a total of 1.6 million, and the totals are there. And the totals that are
Understood.
within the amendments are
Right, the total amount is 1,064,661.
I can yield to that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Madam Speaker.
Yes, so that 1,064,661 was divided to Guam Behavioral Health, 250,000 for rehabilitation and detox, 314,661 to DISIT for in-home services for those with disabilities and other services, direct services, and the 500,000 to the Department of Public Health and Social Services for the homeless services and grants. And that totals the exact same amount, 1,064,661.
Okay, anyway, what we'll do is we'll be maintaining a count. So we'll go down one amendment at a time and we'll keep the tally running. Senator Fisher, you have a question on the amendment?
Thank you, sir. It's actually a point of inquiry for the proponent of the amendment.
All right.
What is the Homeless Coalition?
What is the Homeless Coalition?
that is
Madam
the
Speaker,
question.
do you have a question, response to that inquiry?
Yes, the Homeless Coalition is built of different nonprofit and government agencies who provide direct services to the homeless. It includes behavioral health, Department of Public Health. It's actually also includes now the Office of the Governor's Office of the Homelessness Assistance at the Governor's Office. It includes Salvation Army, Catholic Social Services, and many more. I don't want to miss any, but there are many other members. It includes the School of Nursing at the University of Guam, and many others.
Does that suffice, Senator Fisher?
Yes, partially. Mr. Chair, thank you for that response. A follow-up question would be, I think I understand what the answer will be, but is the Homeless Coalition incorporated or otherwise formed under the laws of Guam?
Try that one more time, the question. Make sure I got that right.
Is the Homeless Coalition incorporated or otherwise formed under the laws of Guam?
Not that I'm aware of. That's why the money is going to the Department of Public Health and Social Services to be the formal entity, to, just like right now, we fund shelters after a bid process. These are normally funded through like Catholic Social Services, which is not part of the government of Guam, but the government of Guam is paying Catholic Social Services for those services because they are the only ones in our community providing them at this point, or at least a lot of them. But those, they go through public health. So public health creates the criteria, and public health decides, where the need lies, and is able to prioritize those.
All right, thank you. Senator Fisher?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you very much for that answer. The reason I was asking those questions is because the Homeless Coalition, as we call it in this amendment, is so poorly defined, not by anybody's fault, it's just the way it is. It's poorly defined because there's so many people participating in it. I'm concerned that what we're doing is potentially creating a $500,000 bucket of cash that the Department of Public Health can just dole out willy-nilly because we don't know what the Homeless Coalition is, and it sounds like anybody can fit under an understanding of what a homeless coalition is. I just don't. It seems like we're just letting $500,000 in cash out of the bag, and for expenditures we neither understand or can appreciate right now. That's the advantage of having the Office of Homelessness and Poverty Prevention, because it is formed. It is something.
Point of order, Mr. Chair, or point of information. It is not formed. It is not at all formed. That office is formed only in the governor's office. At her discretion. It's not formed within the government. That's the whole point.
Okay.
Well,
Senator Fisher.
Okay, yes, sir. Thank you very much for that comment. I suppose we could quibble about it, but at least it is an identifiable entity that has a proven track record. Whereas I know the Department of Public Health is probably doing good things left and right, but I'm unaware that they have a track record of focusing on the issue of homelessness the way the Office of Homelessness and Poverty Prevention does. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. My colleagues, just follow the amendment. After Homeless Coalition, it says or to provide. So in other words, public health has the option to either go with the grants or just provide all the requirement. Anyway, Senator Tideway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. And I think the author of the amendment to start funding already programs that the government of Guam have. We've seen a lot of areas that we were not able to provide additional funding to, and we definitely don't want to see, our funding, creating other programs when we can't even take care of our own programs. So I'm happy that the author of this amendment zeroes in on the area in which is needed from what ARP was paying for before, but again, she made it clear that the governor still has, funding. In fact, it's $213 million in funding and of ARP funding. She wants to continue to fund this OHAPP. But, public health is not probably doing a good job on this. They're doing a great job on this. Just like other appropriations that are given to government agencies as a pass-through. It's called a pass-through. So these nonprofit organizations can continue to do the work they're doing for the homeless and providing, food and medical care for the homeless as well. It's commendable what she's doing here, and I appreciate that the money that's been set aside, is directly for this. So I stand in full support of this amendment and ask my colleagues to please support this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tideway. Senator Barnett.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chair. Rise in support of this amendment. And just as on a little information for my colleagues. The Guam Homeless Coalition has been in existence long before the Office of Homelessness and Poverty Prevention. And this collective is comprised of government agencies, nonprofit organizations, and private sector partners that come together for the purpose of responding to the needs of homeless youth families. They're also a big part of the point-in-time count. So I reject any statement that this funding is being doled out in a willy-nilly fashion. And I just want to remind members that the Office of Homelessness and Poverty Prevention funding that was stricken was 100% for staff salaries. And so I support this amendment because this provides direct assistance to the people who need it the most. And I commend the author for its introduction and ask my colleagues to really support it because, again, we're providing direct services to the people who need it the most and not necessarily employing staff. So, Sidos Masi, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Burnett. Okay. Does anyone else like to speak on the amendment? If not, Senator Parrish.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in support of this amendment. I think what this amendment does, it allows Department of Public Health to accentuate their current services to the homeless population or houseless population and provide wraparound services. So, we know that a lot of the difficulties that are faced by this group is not just about lacking access to affordable housing, but also there could be other issues at stake, that Department of Public Health can assist with, and they are the forefront of this. So I rise in support. Sidos Masi.
All right. Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak? Senator Canata.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to clarify. So this funding appropriation will be directed to public health, and it would be up to them to direct it out to the nonprofits?
Is that a question?
Yes.
Okay, Madam Speaker?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. That's similar to how they do it right now for the children's shelters, the several of the children's shelters, the shelters for women, the centers for the elderly, and those with disabilities, similar to that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. I support the amendment.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to the amendment? I see no hands. Madam Speaker, you care to close it? No? Any objection to the amendment? You have one objection. All in favor, please raise your hand. Right here in front of me.
Mr. Chair, who's objecting? I didn't see.
Senator Park, just raise your hand. Let's get the count. Amendment passes. Now, the next amendment, Madam Speaker, you have another amendment, and it's for...
This is Masi, Mr. Chair. So this amendment, page 117, is to add a new section, and this is to appropriate $250,000 from the general fund to the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center for the detoxification and rehabilitation services. This, again, is the money redirected from the Office of Homelessness to behavioral health. Behavioral health asks for additional money for their regular detox programs, but I'm sure and hope that we're all familiar with that these programs also very much assist them in helping the homeless to come back to their families, come back to work, come back to homes and be able to live, to continue. So this is, $250,000 from that same funding source to the detox at Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness.
Thank you. Anyone like to speak on this amendment? I'm looking around. Senator Parrish first. She was faster, Senator Barnett. Senator Parrish.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I rise in full support of this amendment. We heard testimony, or at least a previous discussion about this, that they need more money, and there's 20 people on the waiting list. And currently what's in the budget doesn't cover that. And, anything we could do to close the gap. We know we have a meth epidemic, and, we hope we don't have the fentanyl epidemic, but we really need assistance. They really need the assistance to get more services. This is a huge need in our community that needs to be addressed. And I ask for my colleagues' support. Zudus Masi.
Thank you. Senator Barnett?
Zudus Masi, Mr. Chair, rise in support of the amendment too. And just want to just note for the record that when you talk about epidemics of drugs, crystal methamphetamine, the fentanyl crisis, which is continuing to worsen, just want to note that the legislature has done significant things to address the different facets of how you combat a drug epidemic. And so we have supported and continue to support treatment, detoxification, rehabilitation services as evidenced by this amendment. Thank you to the author. We've also done things like pass laws that provide tougher sentences for peddlers of the poisons, crystal methamphetamine and fentanyl. So I think that this is how you address this problem. We have to have, obviously, the enforcement and the interdiction, and then also on the other side to help treat those who struggle with addiction through the support of detox and rehabilitation services. And I think the amendment is timely as well as needed, as it was requested by JIBWIC. And it comes just a few days before we enter Rehabilitation Month, which I believe is celebrated in September. So rise in support of this amendment, and again, thank the author for proffering it, and ask the support of my colleagues as well. Zudus Masi.
Thank you, Senator Barnett. Anyone else? Senator Tideway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I stand in full support of this amendment. I think the prior speaker basically said it at all, and the importance of why we're funding this. I just wish we had more funding to provide. But one of the things, again, Mr. Chair, this is part of that one section that we had to take out because it was funded under ARP funding. And the prior speaker also mentioned the fact that that amount, that $1,064,661 was for salaries. Salaries. So this is directly going to the assistance of these individuals who need the help. And many of our homeless individuals out there are under the influence. And if we can help them and rehabilitate them, maybe they can have a fighting chance on trying to hold down a job and sustain themselves. But, anybody who wants to object to this or even the prior one it's not doing any good to do so. So I thank you, Mr. Chair, and stand in full support of this amendment.
Thank you. Madam Vice, do you want to speak on the amendment?
I just want to rise to a point of information, and it's come to my attention as I was working on inquiring with Public Health. The Department of Public Health and Social Service doesn't serve homelessness. What they do with the homeless is they do the service of what programs public health has, like food stamps, SNAP, and other programs that the homeless can qualify for. But I just want this body to know, Mr. Chair, that they don't have a homeless program per se. So, I don't know, maybe I want to take a moment's recess just to confirm that what I'm getting is right, and maybe I can call the director or something, because I want to make sure we're giving all these monies to these different areas that they took away from a homeless program, which was
Point of information, Mr. Chair.
Sir?
The money that was taken was for salaries.
Sir, I'm just telling you that based on a letter that I received that was on my desk and I mean in my box, the Office of Homelessness Assistance and Poverty Prevention, which is OHAP, on what was there and what public health does. So if you can allow me the moment's recess so that I can confirm
Objection.
that what I'm saying.
Understood what you're asking for. Hold on the objection. Okay. We're on this amendment. It's about
You're-
behavioral, not public health. So I just want to make
Yeah,
sure.
I'm just saying that because the retiring speaker said all those who oppose this and the prior amendment, it's a shame. And I'm saying, no, I rise to a point of information, and I'm clarifying the point on what kind of programs Department of Public Health has, what kind does the Office of the Governor has, and what, because we're here to provide policy, and if we're putting money in the wrong areas, then we just got to make sure. I just want to make sure.
Point of clarity,
Understood.
or point of information and clarity, Mr.
It
Chair. I
doesn't hurt to call
basically
the
said,
director and ask.
point of information,
Hold on.
My
Everybody
statement-
slow down, please,
Okay.
okay? The point is, this amendment is about behavioral. They're only addressing your statement about public health. That's all they were addressing.
yeah, Mr. Chair, if
sir-
I may, just to clarify, you know, many of those who it says detoxification and rehabilitation services, Mr. Chair, and you know that many of the homeless that are out there right now have issues
Yes.
with substance abuse.
Understood.
And it's a
Okay.
domino effect.
It's a point
And
of
that's what I was
information.
making a point.
All
So
right.
it all goes hand in hand.
Okay.
If anybody
As-
doesn't understand that, then
No,
they
no,
should go out there and see the situation now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. I think the issue was just that the public health was driven, and that shouldn't have been driven. But anyway, moving along.
Sir, on
Yes,
my
ma'am.
point of
Yes.
information, I'm just asking for a clarification based on information that I received from, is this legit or not? Because if we're making these amendments to, and these resources that was defunded from the Office of the Homeless program, then I just wanted to make sure that no harm, no foul, just to check. Give me a
Understood.
moment.
Okay. There's a motion for recess. You know, folks, it's, yeah.
Can we just
Okay, what,
finish this
Moment's
amendment, Mr.
recess,
Chair?
sir.
This is behavioral health. She's talking about public health. Can
Understood.
we just finish
I'm
this
just
amendment on
checking
behavioral
because
health?
the same thing
Hold
goes
on.
for behavioral health. Based on what was brought up, I'm just asking for clarification. Better to be safe than sorry.
Mr. Chair, there is
Wait, it's not fair
Okay.
that you
absolutely
entertain mine,
no
that it's out of
question
order.
that behavioral health covers
Oh,
detox
my
and
God.
rehabilitation
Ma- ma-
services
Madam-
for
Madam
all of
Speaker,
Guam.
there's a motion. Why don't we just go to the motion? Anyone in support of the motion? Any objection to the motion to recess to
Objection.
get validation?
Objection.
There is 2 objections. All in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That motion fails. Now, are there any objection to this amendment? There's one objection.
I'd
All
like
in
to
fa-
close
you wanna
just real
close? Go ahead.
quickly. Yeah. So again, this amendment is solely to fund $250,000 to the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center for detox and rehab services. It's pursuant to Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness's requests. They believe they were short-funded in the budget. That's one. Number 2 is, because we removed this from the homeless, we very much see the direct correlation between how the homeless, some of these homeless are suffering from substance abuse. And if they cannot take care of that, they cannot return to their families. They cannot even avail of shelters. They cannot avail of services. Not a single service. This is the challenge even OHAP is facing. And so the more that we can provide for these types of services, I think the better we're going to see less resorting to crime, for example, because of that addiction, and throughout our community, all the crime based on addiction. So this is to help them to be able to overcome that and to avail of the shelters that can be available, and of course, all the other services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Is there an objection to the amendment? Objection. All in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Amendment passes. We're going to take a recess until 2 o'clock. Thank you, my colleagues.